Welcome to another Pirkei Avot Shir. We're on chapter 4, Mishna 28, and we'd like to dedicate this episode in memory of Levy ben Moshe and Elisheva but Levy, and also in memory of Avi Mori, Yehuda ben Moshe Esther. Over to Michael.
Thank you, Rav Mashiach. So this Mishnah, number 28 out of 29, in this fourth perek, we are introduced to Rab Elazar HaKapar. And who was he? He was a Tanakh of the latter part of the 2nd century who acquired his knowledge of Torah in the Bet Midrash of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. The exact significance of HaKapar is uncertain. It might mean perhaps of Cyprus, so a Cypriot, or it may denote an occupation of dealing in perhaps asphalt or gum. He spent his mature life in Lydda, and the Talmud often adds to his name the title Berebi, meaning a great or noted man. Of his private life nothing is known, but that he had a son named Eliezer, who is possibly identical with the Talmudic sage called Bar Kapara. He was also the teacher of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levy, who lived in Lydda, and later became a great scholar of his generation. Apart from his dramatic teaching in this fourth perek, he cherished tranquility above all, for he taught, and I quote, "Great is peace, for naught else but peace is the ending that sets its seal on all the benedictions." This is in the Shemona Esrei. And also his another quote of his is, "Love peace and hate dissension." Another quote is, "Keep far from the quarrelling, for if you quarrel with others, you will sin evermore." And he taught humility with a graphic metaphor, and I quote, "Do not be as the upper lintel of a doorframe, but as the threshold. Everyone steps on it, yet ultimately the entire structure is destroyed and it remains in its place." Very true. In his time, Torah study and worship began to flourish in Babylonia, for he taught that eventually all its synagogues and houses of study would be re-established in the land of Israel. So, what does his Mishnah say? Rabbi Elazar HaKapar Omer, Rabbi Elazar HaKapar said, "Hakina'ah v'hata'ava v'hakavod motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam." Envy, inordinate desire, and the search for glory remove a man from the world. So what Rabbi Elazar is saying, that if a person is consumed by jealousy, driven by passion, over the top passion, and is ever hungry to be honored and have honor, he simply will not be happy. Also, his health will suffer, because we know that when you are constantly in a state of angst and vexation about these obsessions, that your body's balance of calmness tips in an unhealthy manner, and you end up with medical problems. You have an upset stomach, as we all know, and that can lead to terrible things. Now let's have a look and see what Rambam comments on this Mishnah. He says, quite briefly, he said that envy, lust, and pursuit of honor drive a man from this world, and that is because these traits, or even one of them, destroy the faith of the Torah, and so neither the intellectual virtues or the dispositional virtues will reach him. So yes, he's commented extensively in his Mishnah Torah, Hilchot Deot, about the dangers of a bad disposition, and he actually I think he mentioned this very Mishnah, if I recall, in one of the later chapters of Hilchot Deot. What does Rav Chaim of Volozhin say about this? Also, he's quite brief. He says, jealousy causes man to sin against his fellow man. Desire causes man to sin against Hashem. Honor is more powerful than both jealousy and desire, and these impulses cause man to waste his lifetime in the pursuit of unnecessary luxuries. And also, I'd like to give one last quote from Mesilat Yesharim. The Ramchal of Chaim Luzzatto said that on this commentary on this Mishnah, he says, many people can control their desire for money and other delights, but cannot control the desire for honor. Honor drives a man more than any other desire. So, wonderful words there from Rav Chaim of Volodin and the Ramchal. But let's go back to this concept of the damage caused by an unhealthy envy, desires, and desire for honor. We learn that King Solomon stated in Proverbs 14:30, envy brings a rotting of the bones. A person who's envious and jealous of other people will always be frustrated with himself and irritated. He perceives everybody else as a threat to him, and he will step over everybody and anything in order to achieve his goals of achievement or wealth, and he feels obsessed by it. And this constant emotional stress will cause ultimately physical disturbances like ulcers and other dispositions. And also all the other the other things like seeking honor runs a similar risk. If you chase after glory, you have an abnormal appetite, an insatiable desire for honor, and it can drive you to very bad places. Sometimes you kind of imagine yourself to be a better or more deserving an honor than perhaps you are. And if you don't receive honor back from people, it frustrates you and hurts you even more. So it's a cycle that can destroy you. And you will just lead to like a brooding resentment, and you will see yourself in time as like a victim of like an injustice, because people aren't giving me honor. Why aren't they giving me honor? It's like a circle that will close in on you.
It's a state of entitlement. It's like you feel you get this chip on your shoulder.
Yeah, exactly.
But Chazal tell us, one who chases after honor will run away from him.
Yes.
One who runs away from honor will run to him. I always mention the Agudas Yisrael convention. Probably it was about maybe mid-80s when there were a big convention of all the Rabbanim, and among them was Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, who was the Gadol Hador in Israel at the time. And before he was about to speak, they made a whole big introduction to him, and they said Ha'admor, Ha'ateret Roshenu, and they gave him all these appellations. And the camera cut to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach as they were giving all these titles, and his face was an absolute picture. He was wincing. It's like, no, this. He completely abhorred any type of praise or recognition of who he was, and it was this that really gave him the status. Well, it contributed to his status of Gadol Hador, because he absolutely rejected any form of kavod. And you see, because of that, kavod would chase after him. He was a living embodiment of what we're talking about now.
Very true. Yes. So with an individual who's constantly seeking honor, he will probably end up with like a persecution complex if he doesn't get the honor that he desires, and it'll turn him insane, and it'll drive him from this world, which is what the Mishna is saying. So what about the third? What about the other condition, which is a warning against lust and extreme craving? Also gluttony is a craving, like an inordinate desire.
Yeah.
That obviously we know the physical consequences of being overweight and eating the wrong things. They will have a life-threatening. They will be life-threatening in their effects. Also, if you are too immoral, or you're licentious, obviously that will destroy you as well. It says in the Talmud, whoever is given to lechery, old age comes swiftly upon him. This was from Gemara Shabbat 152a, and Rambam, himself a physician, added to his Mishna Torah. He says in Hilchot Dayat, in I think the 4th chapter, his strength ebbs and his eyes grow dim, and many other ills before him. The wise physicians have said 1 in 1,000 dies of other ills, and the rest of the 1,000 from excessive coition. So we must remember this. But if we look again at these wonderful words of King Solomon, the actual full Posuk says, what I mentioned was, but envy brings a rotting of the bone. But before that it says, a tranquil healing heart gives life to flesh, but envy brings rotting to the bones. So it's an amazing analysis, an amazing observation by King Solomon, who lived thousands of years ago, to know that a calm heart and a calm soul will bring natural healing to oneself. And this is a very, people meditate just for this purpose. Yes. He is telling you, if your heart is calm, your heart is not full of envy, your heart is not full of inordinate desires, and the chasing after honor, it will naturally look after itself. In fact, the word bones is very important. Atzamot, it perhaps means to your core. When he says
etzem,
like
that's
etzem.
All.
It's down to your bones, That it's like a condition that affects you down to your bones. It may even be a metaphorical, which is very interesting.
They also say that tracht gut und sein gut. I think that's how they say in Yiddish. Think good and it will be good. Yeah. If your attitude is positive, it will influence the way the things will turn out. Hashem will give you like a better path to go. Yes. But you need to be in that mindset to receive it.
Yeah. Now let's look at the Tanakh's proofs of this Mishnah's teachings. So Korach organized the following to oppose Moshe Rabbeinu and Aharon. His motivation lay in the 3 elements which our Mishnah has stated. He was envious of Aaron. He had inordinate, passionate desire for Aaron's position. He was obviously yearning for honor, and his end was disastrous, as we know. But even earlier than that, Cain saw Abel offering to Hashem. His offering was accepted while his own was rejected. So he grew angry and killed his brother Abel. And why the anger? From jealousy. We look at inordinate desire in terms of the Bnei Israel in the wilderness, when they cried out after receiving manna, which was heaven's offering, which should have satiated any desire, because it could taste like anything.
Yeah, so what you think.
So what happened? No, there was a clamour for meat, and this was pure lust. And it was unwarranted and it was excessive. And again, even as their first mouthful was taken of the quails, the result was a disaster. Also, we can talk about this desire for honor is in another period of Jewish history, is when the Bnei Israel were about to enter the Promised Land. Moshe sent a group to scout the land. So from each of the tribes, there was the head of the tribe would be the representative of the tribe to go and look and spy on and look at the land and come back with their assessment. And what did they say? They reported that it was a nightmare if they went there for various reasons. And what happened? The there was a rebellion and there was despair, and the result of it was that the generation of the wilderness was undone. They had to wander 40 more years until that generation would die, and the new generation would eventually conquer Canaan and make it the land of Israel. So what could have been the motive for these well, it was 10 reports. It was 12 that were sent out and 10 reported dreadful reports. So the Zohar suggested that perhaps they realized once the people were settled in Israel, soon enough there would be a central government, and their power and positions as the head of the tribes would be dissolved, and under a central government they would have no importance. So they tried to maintain their positions and their honor by making a bad report, saying, look, let's not go in yet, let's not take any drastic steps, let's not go and and conquer the land, because for ulterior motives. So perhaps that's another teaching. And we must also understand that it is ultimately human nature. We do have these feelings from a young age. When we are children, we are jealous. When we are children, we are greedy. And when we are children, some parts of us want a certain type of childish honor. But they exist in us, and obviously it's not a fault because Hashem created us in His image. So these are aspects of God as well. We have to accept that. But they are passions that can be used, if used in the right way, can be special and can be useful. But I'll just finish talking about Joseph is my last example in regards of of proofs from the Tanakh. When did the trouble start for Yosef? It was when his brothers came to envy him on account of the dreams that he mentioned, and that he insisted on revealing to his brothers. They started the ball rolling, but it wasn't his fault. It wasn't Joseph's fault to mention the dreams. Perhaps the brothers shouldn't have been, shouldn't have succumbed to this jealousy. We know that Joseph was always the favourite of his father Jacob, and that was enough for him to make his brothers resent him. There was Rav Chaim Abraham ben Aryeh Lev of Mohilev suggests that they could have feared him, that in the respect that their father Jacob would have a special love for Joseph, and that would make Joseph his only heir, and to bestow upon him all of the brachot and leaving little or none to them. This was a plausible fear that remained in them for those early years. We know that in the Tanakh that when Jacob lay ill on his bed, Joseph took his two sons to visit him, and Jacob blessed him. And when Joseph left his tent, his face shone with joy, as we read. And his brothers were obviously very bitter, and suggested we read in Midrash Rabbah of Genesis, all the world's favours no one unless he is rich and imposing and blessed by fortune. Our father Jacob spoke thus only with Joseph because he is a sovereign ruler. So this was the words of his brothers, and envious words regarding what they assumed happened in the tents. But Jacob had to assure them that he had blessings enough for all of them. So this we know. So Joseph, in his 17th year, he was 17 years old, he was the object of his brother's envy. As a result, he was wrenched from the world he knew. His brothers threw him into a pit, thinking that he was going to die, and they sold him, and he became a slave in Egypt. But he arrives in Egypt. This is a perfect example of these conditions that Joseph HaTzadik managed to he managed to protect himself from. In Egypt, Joseph becomes a target of lust. The wife of his master Potiphar seeks to seduce him, and soon enough Joseph gets blamed and loses his position and is casted into prison. And we're told of also his death. Joseph died, and all his brothers were alive. I think he was the first one to die amongst his brothers.
years old.
Yeah, and why? And it's asked. The Chachamim ask, why did Joseph die before his brothers? The answer is because he conducted himself with imperiousness, and the concept of dominion and rule buries those who have it, and the dust of sovereignty is hard to bear. Joseph died, and then after all his brothers, even though Joseph was next to the youngest amongst them. So here, this was from Gemara Barachos 55 Amud Aleph. So we learn that if you pursue honor, you have to accept that you will be under a massive amount of stress, and it will probably shorten your life. You see that very often. People live very short but intense lives when they're in the public eye, and it brings a shortness to their lives. So when a person seeks kavod, he has to accept that it may take him from this world earlier. So let's talk about envy a little bit. There is a famous midrash that the Pirkei Avot quotes from Mivha Pninim, and this is a fine midrash about envy and craving. So the Satan once met two humans. One was an envious person, the other one was a man of strong desires. The Satan said, "Let one of you ask for something and it will be granted him, but the other will be given twice as much." The envious one would not take the initiative and ask for anything. He begrudged his companion the double portion that the other would receive. But the greedy man wanted double gift, so he pressed the envious one to speak his request first. At last, the bitter man asked that one of his own eyes would be gouged out, so that the greedy one would lose two. So there's a very good midrash regarding the qualities or detriment of greedy and envious
It's a very
people.
powerful, stark midrash, that.
Yeah. So that, like I mentioned before, it is also good to. These feelings are within us from youth, but how can they be channeled to be a positive force? The Talmud tells us that we learn this in Baba Basra, that the jealousy of scholars increases wisdom. Envious competition and rivalry amongst Chachamim and Talmidei Chachamim will stimulate a will to learn. As each student wants to outdo each other, it can be a good competitive energy. So we can harness such emotions to be a good thing. And also one must respect ourselves. So a minimum amount of a kind of honor should be within ourselves. It can be considered a kind of self-respect, and this is very important. So what about the concept of desiring honor? How is this good? How can there be a good aspect to this? You have to remember there is a quotation that is said, "There is no honor but through the Torah." This is actually Pirkei Avot in the chapter 6, Mishna 3. Don Isaac Abarbanel notes that these three qualities have their roots in the imagination. in the creative inclination of the heart, in the human capacity to build structures of vision. So you must let these forces be drives or harnessed in service to Hashem. And then man can achieve heroic or spectacular things for Hashem. You have to let these emotions be harnessed for the right reasons. You must not let them be harnessed to the Satan. If so, a person would be cut off and is going to be on a road to nowhere. So let us also look at the last quotation where it says that these desires remove a man from the world. You've got to consider Hashem's plan for the world. Each of us have our own destiny and our own purpose in creation. And if we push ourselves away from God through these three vices or immoral attitudes, we remove ourselves technically from the game of life. We no longer serve God's purpose. He has a mission for us. He wants us to be the best we can and wants us to be something in this world. But if we adopt these three attitudes, we take ourselves out of His desire of competing in this game or taking these tests. This is very important to understand. And let us now, to conclude, I would like to... we've heard some of echoes of this throughout our teachings of these 4 prakim, but let's have a quick recap of the various people in Pirkei Avot that have taught this. Let's look at the first Mishna of this 4th perek. Ben Zomar teaches that the strong man is one who can control his inclination, implying a warning against lusts. He teaches that the rich one is the one satisfied with his lot, and implicitly cautions against envy. Then he states that the honored man is one who honors others, making it clear that no good can come from purely seeking after glory. Also, in the 2nd perek, Mishna 16, we have the teaching of Rabbi Yeshua, and I quote that an evil eye, the evil inclination, and hatred of people remove a man from the world. They're very, very similar teachings, and they correspond roughly to the trio that we are talking about in our Mishnah. Again, the words of Akavya ben Mahalalel at the beginning of the 3rd perek also warns us against the 3 evils of our Mishnah. Know where you came, remember your ignoble physical beginnings, and you will realize how unworthy of honor you are and how pointless its pursuit. And know where you're going, ponder your end, so that no envy will be a
stumbling block. Yeah,
exactly. And know before whom you are destined to give a future account and reckoning. Reflect that you will be held responsible for your weaknesses, that you will have to face again and answer for everything that you do under the grip of these 3 types of temptations. And hopefully you'll find the strength to overcome them and be worthy of God's plan.
Wow, what an amazing explanation of that particular Mishnah. That's a very difficult Mishnah, and I think you put it very concisely, and I look forward to next time we convene. We're going to do Mishnah 29, continuing with the words of Rabbi Elazar Kapar, and until then it's up to us to wish you a very wonderful and blessed week. See you soon.